Hi, Angela.
Hi, Deepak. How are you?
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for coming to my show. And what time is it in Lisbon right now?
It's about 3 p.m.
3 p.m. Is it nice, warm? What is it
It's
like?
a really nice day. It's a little bit cloudy, but
Mm-hmm.
t-shirt weather.
T-shirt weather. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I'm sitting in Tampa, Florida. It's 10 a.m. It's also t-shirt weather, but soon it will be sweaty and hot. Well, thank you. Once again, can you please tell us like where in America you grew up and which city or which state you spent most of your time growing up?
So I was born in Houston, Texas, but then we moved to St. Louis when I was about 5 years old. And I grew up there, graduated from high school there. Um, we moved around a lot. Uh, when my parents split, my dad wound up with custody. And so that was a little bit different. That was in the 80s when it was still very rare for a single dad. And that meant difficulty with jobs because, why would a man have to call out sick to stay home with a sick kid? That's
Right,
the woman's
right,
job, right?
right.
Um, so that was part of the moving around a lot. And then I took a couple of years off, went to Mizzou, University of Missouri at Columbia for undergrad and lived there for 4 years. And then moved to Charlottesville, Virginia for grad school in anthropology and wound up just doing the terminal masters and going back to Mizzou to work with my undergrad advisor for my PhD. Lasted about 2 years in that program and decided to switch to library science. Um, a lot of factors went into it. 6 figures of student loan debt and just looking at the time until graduation and the job market and becoming an academic librarian would let me stay connected to academia and work with anthropology departments, helping their students learn how to do research. And so I got a master's in library science at Mizzou. And then before I even graduated, I had a tenure track faculty librarian position lined up, which was absolutely amazing compared to the job market for anthropologists. Um, and that was in Georgia, University of West Georgia, which is about an hour west of Atlanta. And so I moved there and lived there for about 5.5 years until after I had tenure. And then I moved into Atlanta and lived there until this past December.
Very nice. So, most of the time has been spent in Missouri, right? Growing up, and then you moved to Charlottesville, Virginia for a little while, and then you came to Lisbon, right?
So there were 12 years in Georgia and then
12 years in
Lisbon.
Georgia. Okay, okay. So, what inspired you to move to Portugal? Had you been there before, or you had some connections already?
So I lived in Atlanta through COVID, and Georgia never really shut down, even at the worst of it when other states were like full lockdown. You couldn't tell in the part of Atlanta that I lived in. Um, and if people couldn't go out, they were having house parties. Like it was so not taken serious. And I can't blame the neighbors that were doing things that I knew were high risk, because the local like news and all of the media was acting like it was not that big of a deal. And anybody that's not reading direct from the scientists was getting some really mixed messaging.
Right.
When the vaccines came out, I don't know 100%, but I never saw a stat where Georgia had 50% vaccinated. It was just an embarrassingly low rate. Meanwhile, I'll say, I think it was fall 2021 in December, I was talking to a neighbor who made the move before I did. And she was talking about how excited she was getting her house ready to sell so that she could move to Portugal, and telling me all about it. And I was still thinking I had tenure. I was just going to stay where I was until I retired. And then that stuck in my head, though. And one of the things was, within, like, I think it was by that December, or maybe it was early January. Time has no meaning for me anymore. But within just a few months of when the vaccines came out, Portugal was like around 90% fully vaccinated.
Wow.
And that, on the surface, okay, that's just one stat. People are more willing to get vaccinated, whatever. But what that tells me is that the culture here is more willing to act for the common good. And, I may not like getting a vaccine, but if it's going to help my neighbors, help me avoid spreading this scary new disease to my neighbors,
Right.
I'll do what it takes to protect my community.
Right.
And that's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
And it was a few months after talking to that neighbor, I realized, yeah, I have tenure, but I'm not happy in this job anymore. I don't like the way the university administration is going. I don't like the way the politics in Georgia and in the US is going. I'm just not happy here. And Portugal looks really great. So, and my friend was able to connect me with a Facebook group that focuses on supporting people that are interested in moving to Portugal. And so that made it a lot easier. That this group has basically a how-to step-by-step, here's exactly what you need kind of guide for free, instead of having to figure it out all on my own. So
Very, very nice. So you're like thinking a lot of things, like, people are not taking this scary disease seriously. I'm not happy in my job. Georgia isn't very appealing. And at the same time, your friend appeared and she told you about Portugal, and then, it was like automatic, right? One thing led to the next, and you're in Lisbon now, right?
yeah. And it feels like it was a super long process, but it was actually pretty easy compared to what it could have been. Last year, I was able to work fully remotely, still in my faculty librarian position, and spend 2 months in Portugal visiting a bunch of different cities in all the different regions. and kind of like, one, do I really want to move here? How am I going to feel when I'm actually here? And two, where would I want to actually move to? And this is only the third time that I was out of the US for more than just a couple of weeks. And the first time I traveled overseas was in high school as a summer exchange student in Okinawa. And after about a month, culture shock kicked in, and I started to, have those feelings of discomfort and all of that. And then the second time was when I was in grad school for anthropology. I did a in-country language training program in Indonesia. And after a while, had that culture shock kick in, and had a few other factors of the death of somebody close to me while I was on the opposite side of the world. And that was really tainted that experience. So I was afraid that it would seem great if I came for 3 weeks or a month, but 2 months would be beyond the point where I had hit culture shock before. Right. And it never kicked in. There was a point where I visited the Algarve, which is the southern coast. And there are parts of that are just really touristy. And I felt really, I'm not digging this vibe. But instead of wanting to go home to Atlanta, I wanted to go back to a previous city that I had stayed in Portugal. And that was really like, okay, yeah, this is a good place for me.
Very nice. So in total, how many months have you spent in Portugal altogether so far?
So it was the 2 months last year, and then I came over. I applied for the visa December 22nd, and then turned around and flew over here on a tourist visa and arrived December 28th. And have been here since then, except for a week and a half that I flew back to the US to get the visa stamp put in my passport. So I guess this is 3.5 months-ish.
Okay. And you're feeling good, right?
Yeah.
Very nice. So you feel, do you feel there are some cultural differences as an American living in Portugal that are very, obvious to you?
So some of the differences are just being in such a walkable space. I walk up to a crosswalk and cars will just slam on the brakes. In the US, crossing at a crosswalk still kind of feels like taking your life in your own hands in some places, especially in Atlanta. That's just the focus on being able to walk, the walkability. Another thing that really stood out to me was just the number of really elderly folks and visibly disabled folks that I see walking down the street. And at first it was a little like, oh, do they just not have as good of medical care or something? And then I realized it's because people with disabilities are not stuck at home here.
Mm.
In the US, so many people with disabilities are, especially if you're on Social Security disability, you're in low cost housing because the amount that people actually get on that is, you basically need subsidized housing to be able to afford to exist.
Mm.
And that generally is located in places where you are entirely dependent on a car
Mm.
or some other sort of transportation, which means you can't just go for a walk in your neighborhood.
Right.
And that just, it feels healthier here for people to be able to be out. And even if you can't drive or can't walk very far, you can
Mhm.
walk half a block to the cafe and sit and enjoy a coffee on a patio or something.
That's
Uh,
that's that's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. And how are people in general compared to Americans? Are people there are more open to talk to strangers, and they or what is their demeanor like?
Everyone's really friendly and kind. Um, Having the language barrier, I'm still very early stages of learning Portuguese. And I live in a neighborhood where there are some folks that speak English, but there are a lot of places that I go that they just don't speak any English.
Mhm.
And I love that because that means I have to actually work on practicing and learn as opposed to places where I could get by just speaking English. Um, but that means that I'm not able to have normal conversations with a lot of folks very easily. Um, so far, the people that I've met, though, have been really just open and, people that I've talked to twice at a cafe give me their phone number and let me know if you need anything. You can always call me. Um, I grew up not wanting to be a bother, so I haven't
Right.
tried asking anybody for help with anything to test how that would go. But it seems very friendly. The I think the contrast is, I think people here are very kind,
Mhm.
but they're a little bit more reserved. The Portuguese folks are more reserved, as opposed to in the US, where people are very nice,
Right.
but aren't always kind.
Mhm.
And I think
Kind
that,
in a way to offer help, or what do you mean by?
yeah. So in the South, you get the, oh, well, bless your heart,
In
which
Virginia
is,
too, right? That happens
huh?
in that happens in Virginia all the time.
Yeah. And that's like, it's very nice,
Right.
but
Right.
it's not always kind. Um, Whereas here, they might not be as smile every time they see you, but they'll be kind,
Okay.
you know.
So if they're talking to you, if they are willing to have a conversation, that they're not doing it just for the sake of doing it. They actually mean it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And interesting because in America, people can smile and say "How you doing" on the street, but that may not lead to the next thing. They just being superficially nice. So you're trying to say that that's what's kind about Portuguese people, right? I mean, they might not smile all the time, but they might be kind.
Yeah, they might not show the typical what people in the South and the Midwest would read as nice.
Right.
Um, I've also been told that, if you're just too agreeable, people don't trust you
Here in
because
Portugal or
here in Portugal,
right.
because if you like everything and you agree with everything, you must be lying.
Mm.
Whereas, in the US, there's so much conflict avoidance in some areas, at least, that like it's nice to just smile and nod instead of saying, "Oh, that's really stupid."
So do you think that is there's a lack of trust around it in the U.S. when people always agree, always say nice things to about your night, about your car, about your home, about your children? No, everything is nice. Everything is nice. So you never know when are they going to tell you the truth. Like actually, it's not nice. Your car is not nice.
I think I don't think the issue of trust has ever come up in the US.
Right.
It's
Okay.
just here that they don't
Okay.
trust that.
Oh. Okay.
Which another thing that you think of Portuguese people as, all right, not you, but a lot of
Mhm.
people think of Portuguese people as kind of a monolith.
Mhm.
But Portugal has arrangements with their former colonies that provide different avenues for a visa to move here. And I have not even tried to wrap my head around the differences because figuring out my own process is enough.
Mhm. Right.
But the neighborhood that I live in, there are a lot of Brazilians and Angolans
Mhm.
and other people that, I'm not going to walk up and say, "Hey, where are you from?" Because that
Right.
would just
Right.
be kind of rude. Um, and yeah, so there's a lot more diversity here than I think the image of Portugal conjures up for Americans.
What do you miss about America and living in Portugal? Lisbon? Do you miss anything about Atlanta or things that you were able to do easily or talk to people or is there anything you miss?
All I miss are my friends.
Okay.
If I could just move everybody that I care about over here, I wouldn't miss anything.
Very nice. Thank you. Let's move on to the work topic. You you coaching now, right? And can
Yes.
you talk a little bit about that and what led you to think that there's a gap where people need to figure out how to move out of academia or how to figure out what they want to do in life is life.
So I do coaching and I also do teach some classes for professional development for librarians, and then also some small group programs that are kind of a blend. Um, and they span kind of a range of topics. So it's not just moving out of librarianship, it's also developing a coaching approach to leadership and figuring out how to manage your workload strategically because academia and libraries both will just pile on as much as you will take, and you end up overworked and burnt out if you don't learn how to say, I can't do anymore.
Right.
Um, and part of that is as a librarian, I did so many different things that it's just normal to me to have like 5 different things going at once, but managed so that I'm not overdoing it. Um, so I was a librarian for 12 years, and part of that was I moved into leading a department. And before that, I was heavily involved in uh, supporting junior colleagues through mentoring. And then as I became a department head, I was able to focus on supporting my team in the way that I wished I had had when I was in their position. Um, and I also regularly taught a credit bearing semester long course on information literacy and learning how to do college level research and understand that bias is not just using opinionated words, it's also general understandings about how the world works, and even which theory you lean toward in your field and so on, and how do you think about identifying those. Anyway, so in that context of teaching, I was really into critical pedagogy and how do you help students connect what they already know to these new ideas and build their skills in critically evaluating things instead of just being, a lecturer pouring out knowledge for them to absorb.
Right.
And so that critical pedagogy focus is very much on, these are not just empty vessels that I'm filling up. These are full people with lives outside of the classroom and experiences that they bring into this. And then that other side of supporting people, as I learned more about what coaching is, it feels like just a natural fit of working with you to help you get clear on what's most important to you and work through how you can reach your own goals. Coaching is not like the little league coach holding, helping somebody learn how to swing a bat. It's asking you how thought-provoking questions that help you work through pulling out what you already know. Right. You just had it kind of buried. And that really aligns well for me with that background in critical pedagogy.
This kind of coaching or this kind of education is not offered in university setting, like how to find out what you know best and how you use it.
Right.
So, are you have you only started doing this when you arrived in Lisbon, or were you doing it before you left America?
So, I think it was 2022. I started working toward this path and enrolled in a coach training program that's accredited by the International Coaching Federation, and started actually practicing while enrolled in that, and I haven't been marketing myself as well as I could have, because navigating an international move kind of took up a lot of my headspace.
Right.
I've been practicing and am now starting to really focus on building my practice. So I do individual coaching, and then the developing a coaching approach to leadership program, which focuses on, it's not coach training, because a manager is never going to be a professional coach because they have management duties, right? And they're working with a team that has that hierarchy built in, and in a lot of cases, a lot of long-term baggage. But how do you lean into asking more questions instead of just the minute somebody comes to you with a problem saying, I think you should do this? How do you help them work through how to solve that problem
Right.
and just show more curiosity?
Right.
That's a big part of it, is instead of assuming, oh, you're having problems because of this.
Right.
Well, is that really what it is?
Right.
What's at the root of this and how do we move forward? And that's I really enjoy doing that because I see that as a way to make libraries kinder. Um, there's a lot of toxicity in a lot of workplaces, but I'm familiar with it in libraries and academia. There's been a lot of research done in the past few years. I hope you did not just hear that. My dog came over and made noise at me. Um, there's been a lot of research done lately um, about the low morale experiences in libraries and some of the toxicity that really feeds that challenge. And I see this as sort of a way to help improve things.
Right.
Um,
It's
yeah.
wonderful what you're doing. It's amazing. Yes, this is very needed, I think. And how do you market yourself? Mostly through LinkedIn, or do you have your own website or other social media avenues?
So I have LinkedIn, I have a website, I have a newsletter,
Okay.
um, and it's the Coaching Librarian. But you don't have to be a librarian to learn something if you're in a leadership role,
Right.
because that's my background. The
Right.
examples tend to come from library settings, but I focus on tips on becoming more coach-like as a leader. There's been research on different leadership styles, and you need a lot of different tools in your toolkit. You can't just be a coaching leader and never have to, discipline somebody.
Right.
But of the available tools, coaching was the one that had the most significant positive impact on employee morale. And having that in your toolbox is really valuable, but it's also really hard to implement without taking the time to learn more about what it is and what it isn't and how to do it a little bit better. So that's what I focus on, is just tips on how to start implementing this in small ways.
Yeah. Very nice. Thank you. Um, Angel, do you have anything else to share about your life in Lisbon? An American who's recently moved from Atlanta, left her tenure track library job to coach. Do you have anything else to add before we finish this conversation?
Not that stands out. Um, it's very dog friendly here as well.
Oh, dog friendly. That's another plus, right? So you can take your pets in the coffee shops. Is that what you mean, or anywhere?
It depends on which coffee shops, but a lot of the ones that you can't have outdoor seating. So, you know,
So you take the pet in, right?
and I was reading some news earlier, a, an article about a new grocery store opening. And one of the, along with bike racks and electronic car charging, they have dog parking.
Mm,
I've never seen that before. Maybe I just didn't read the right articles in the US, but the idea that dog parking is an amenity that the grocery store offers was kind of new to me.
it's like these days they have a special parking for electric scooters or skateboards, which wasn't there like 10 years ago. Now you park your scooters before you enter the building. So like you park your dogs right outside.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So did you get your dog here, or is this also from Atlanta? The dog you brought? Yeah.
She's also from Atlanta.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Is she getting used to the Portugal weather? Or
The
he?
weather hasn't been that different so far. She loves when people want to pet a dog on the street, they call it a festa, a little party.
Oh, gosh.
Um, and she loves going and getting her little festas from all the people in the neighborhood. Um,
Nice.
so that's been a feature of the walkability.
And you love the walkability. And thank you so much, Angela, for coming to my show and talking to me and giving me the time and sharing all the insights from Lisbon.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.